Bobby from New Jersey, back for a video again. And as I was coming up on 1,000 subscribers, I promised an answer video to whatever questions you posted in the comments. So I'm making good on that promise now. I'm enjoying a lambic, a cherry lambic, otherwise known as a creek. It was in my basement in a barrel for a year. This was a Wales Club project that turned out really nice. Very sour beer. I like it both dry like it is now, as well as back sweetened with a little bit of cherry juice. But it's a great beer. I'm going to be enjoying this for a while because you have them in basically 6-ounce pours. I printed out the comments so I can address them one at a time. Hope this doesn't go too long or get too boring, but I wanted to give everybody the respect that they deserve. The first one is from Joe Malone 3113, and he asked about fermentation, how I control my fermentation temps, and what do I use? What did I use when I first started out compared to how I started? I'll address that one first. When I first started, I didn't even know that fermentation temperature control was a big deal, or I didn't even know people cared about it. So, of course, my first couple extract beers were fermented probably in, I would say, the mid-70s, or even higher, I'm not even sure. But as I learned that it was important, I sort of made the normal progression where I would put the bucket, or whatever my fermenter was at the time, I suppose it was a bucket, and I'd put it into like a large Rubbermaid bin, and throw a couple of frozen ice bottles, or they were like 16-ounce water bottles that I froze overnight, and I would just change those out as it melted, and that would help me keep the primary temperature down for the first say 48 hours, which is the most important part of it. Now what I use now is an upright freezer that I got on Craigslist for about $20, and I added a temperature controller to it, and I will cut to a shot of that in my basement right now. It's big enough to hold 4 carboys at a time, so I can do some lagering, and you can't. I mean, there's no dual temperature zones or anything like that. But if I'm doing some back-to-back lagers, I don't mind keeping a previous lager at 48, 49 degrees while I'm doing the primary on my next lager batch. So it's nice to be able to do some cold conditioning. And also, when I have a bunch of kegs that are ready to drink, but I don't have any positions in my kegerator at the time, I'll throw the kegs in there and let them cold condition at 35 degrees or so. I do have to start looking for a replacement though, because this thing is like circa 1982, and the cooling lines are getting all rusty inside. So I'm probably wasting more electricity than necessary, and I should probably go to a more energy efficient, newer model. The other question Joe Malone had was what my favorite house homebrew is, and my favorite recipe. I really don't have one. I've only brewed a couple of beers more than one time, especially when it comes to the exact recipe. In fact, I don't think I've ever... nope, I just did actually. I made a Bohemian Pilsner in November, and I just re-brewed it because I felt like I fermented it a few degrees too warm, and I got a little bit more fruity esters out of it than I really wanted to. But other than the fermentation temperature, I did copy the recipe exactly. I do make a lot of American ambers. I like hoppy American ambers. If you look at Brewing Classic Styles recipe book, you'll find the West Coast Blaster. I've made that, or some variant of that, about 3 times now, so I do really like hoppy amber beers. But I've been really enjoying the sour beers lately, and I would say that I would like to brew at least 2 of these a year and let them build up a pipeline. Tom Roeder he's been participating in, via comments for a while now, and he's been making some of his own videos. I definitely like what he's been doing, so a little shout out to him. Said I never dry hopped, and yeah, there's a couple of kits on the way that require dry hopping. Now, I mean, that might have already happened since I've waited so long to get to this video, but can I use a sterilized hop bag for this? When you dry hop, do you dry hop in a dispensing keg, or is that a fermenter dry hop? There's several methods. It is true there are a lot of different methods, and especially, you can use pellets, you can use whole hops. Do they go in the primary, secondary keg? I have only dry hopped in my serving keg because I would say in the last year or so, I don't really secondary beers anymore unless I need to move the beer off of a yeast cake that I want to use for a follow-up batch. For the most part, I let the beers ferment out completely, even drop clear in the primary, so I'm looking at 3 to 4 weeks of primary, including a cold crash for a few days at the end, and then I rack into my keg. And any dry hop beers I've done, I have put whole hops into a grain bag, or I should say a nylon sack that I have dipped in Star San for a while. And I have a bunch of the 3/4 inch diameter stainless steel ball bearings that were actually the valve in the Sankey kegs that I converted into my vessels. And I use those to weigh down the bag so it'll sink. And I don't remove my dry hops at all. I actually leave them in the keg until the keg is kicked, and they only start getting grassy after like months. So I have an American brown, or like a brown IPA in a keg right now, and there's about a half a gallon left, and it's been in there for, I don't know, 8 months now, and it's starting to taste a little bit grassy. But I don't know, up to 6 months or so, it was fine. Some people get worried about leaving their dry hop in for more than 2 weeks, but to be honest with you, I mean, tastes great. So I leave mine the whole time. I mean, if you use pellets, it's a little bit tricky to get all of that particulate out of suspension, because even if you use a bag, a lot of that stuff kind of gets through the bag and floats. Eventually it'll settle out, but if you're impatient, you're going to have some floaters in your beer. Whole hops doesn't have that problem. They stay contained in the pouch in the nylon bag a lot better. So I would definitely recommend using whole hops if you can. Take some advice. I've been enjoying his videos. He's hilarious. Can you please go over your cleaning process for your fermenters? What have you tried and liked, and what have you not liked? Do you use brushes? I've sort of slacked off on my cleaning regimen since I got started. I think it's pretty easy to get a little overboard with the cleanliness. Of course, you hear horror stories about 5 or 6 infected batches, in a row and things like that. But I think it's a lot of common sense. I use warm water and OxyClean to do my initial cleanup after fermentation and brewing. Rinse with hot water, and then I'll the next day, or I should say the next brew day, I'll rinse my stuff off real quick, and then I will, for the cold side stuff like starter flasks and my fermenters especially, I usually only add about a gallon of water and my Star San solution to that. And if you use the larger container that has the measuring cup on the top of it, 1 ounce is good for 5 gallons, and so a half an ounce is good for 2.5 gallons, and so on. I literally just I fill it up about to 1/4 ounce, and I add that to a little over a gallon of water for just about any purpose. I never make 5 gallons of Star San at a time. I know you can store it over some time if you keep a lid on it, but I really just don't want a bunch of Star San sitting around. So I'll put about 1.25 gallons in my carboy, shake it up maybe 3 times while I'm brewing, and pour that into a small bucket that I can use to use as my blow-off bucket when I finally put my fermenter to sleep. I do use brushes on glass. I only have a couple of glass carboys that I use very infrequently, but I will use a carboy brush on that. during the OxyClean part of the cleaning cycle. But I use a lot of better bottles for my primary fermentation, and I actually prefer to just do a few hours of hot OxyClean soaking to get the major soil off, and then I'll dump that out and I'll put a damp washcloth in there. And you don't really want a lot of water in there, you just want a damp washcloth, and you can shake that thing around like crazy, and that usually cleans up some of the more stubborn soil, especially where the kreuzen ring is. Okay, let's see. Brew Dave 40, congrats on making partner. I'm going to my first NHC this year with a couple of my MASH Club members, and would love to get together. Definitely. And I'm definitely, willing to hook up and say hi to people. It's going to be a little crazy. Everybody's got their own thing going on, and I'm certainly going with, 6 or 8 of the Wells Club members. So definitely, let's hook up, have a toast, drink some beers. Hope to see everybody there. Let's see. SJ Poor, any ideas on how I could be so far off with my strike water and sparge water calculation? To give some details here, the fact that he used way too much water, he could have gotten away with only 4 gallons of sparge. Figuring out your volumes is probably one of the most intimidating aspect of all grain brewing for a beginner, and couple that with trying to hit temperatures when you're mixing all of these different temperatures together. I did have a 2-part video on doing temperature calibration, but I didn't really talk about volumes that much. The way that I do it is basically I calculate for about 1.5 quarts per pound for my initial strike volume. So that's pretty easy to do. It's simple math. The next thing you need to do is do a little bit of math between what your desired pre-boil volume is. A lot of people like to start off with about 6.5 gallons in the kettle for a 5-gallon batch, and then compare that to how much wort you're going to drain off on your first runnings. Now, I'm talking about batch sparging here, so if you're thinking about fly sparging, it's a different thing altogether. But let's say that given a normal grain absorption ratio of about half a quart per pound, so let's figure you put 1.5 quarts per pound into the mash as your strike volume, and you lose about half a quart to absorption. You're going to get out about a quart per pound in your first runnings. Okay, so just take your 6.5 gallons that you want to start with, subtract how much runoff you're going to have, and that's how much you need to sparge with, again, if you're batch sparging. So it's pretty simple math. You have to also account for the dead space in your mash tun. If you don't have some device that goes all the way to the bottom of your mash tun to drain out all the liquid, you're going to lose a little bit of that. So add that volume to the absorption loss as well to figure out how much you're going to get out of your first runnings. Now you can cheat. You can do your first runnings into an ale pail that has the calibration marks on the side, and just measure how much you get out of that. And that's an easy way to cheat. You don't have to do all the calculations. You just have to read how much wort you drained out, and then make up the rest of the volume in sparge. Let's see. Jay Turi, you'd like to see me do an advanced all-grain brew start to finish. I've done 2 all-grain videos in the past, and they've been long enough to be 2-parters, so I guess they've been about 20 minutes long. But I can appreciate the fact that I'm partner now, so I can do much longer videos. I just wonder, I try to run that fine line between being comprehensive and detailed with being just utterly boring for everybody to watch. Just for the sake of trying it out, next time I brew, I'll do a much more comprehensive, detailed video of all the steps I take. Okay. Where did I get my kegels? Well, he's referring to the converted Sankey kegs that I turned into all my brewing vessels. The first couple that I got, I went to a scrapyard, and they were all in a big dumpster ready to be crushed. And you know, frankly, I don't condone people stealing kegs and selling them for scrap, but at that point I felt justified in rescuing them from being crushed. You know, you could say I was buying stolen property. I would just say I was rescuing a bunch of kegs from being crushed into a cube and melted down for some other purpose. I know a lot of people do go directly to Sabco and get their converted kegs. Now those were decommissioned directly from the breweries, and they go, you know, right to Sabco for somewhat of a reconditioning before they're sold as brew vessels. This is not an invitation to tell me how you can just go get a keg and not return it, you know, just to pay the deposit or what have you. I'm not even going to discuss it, because the breweries are definitely losing, you know, thousands and thousands of kegs to this, and that's the end of my soapbox about it. But please don't post you know, comments about how it's perfectly fine and ethical to just simply not return a keg to the liquor store. You know, some people have a bunch of old ones sitting in a barn somewhere, and they'll put them on Craigslist, and if you feel okay with doing that, that's another way of getting them. Let's see. From Kenapop 3, I'm an extract brewer 97% of the time. I like to mini mash one night and use the wort collected to then complete an extract brew the next night, kind of like a modern party guile brewer. Google the term. You know, it's like I get the extract thing. I get why people would want to do it. I know a lot of people who are experienced all grain brewers who still throw an extract batch together here and there. Personally, I get no personal satisfaction out of mixing malt extract with water and making wort that way. No disrespect for the people that really do want to do that. Now, on the party guile thing, I have done 2 party guile batches, and usually I do that if my intended batch is going to be like over 1090 OG and above. You know, it is a big waste of sugar if you were to only derive a single batch's worth of wort out of that. I've done an English barley wine at like 1118 original gravity, and then basically used my entire sparge for an ESB, and that thing came in at like 1055. So I ended up with 2 very nice beers. In fact, the English barley wine is nearing 3 years old now, and it just took a gold in the Northeast NHC regionals, and I'm psyched about having one of my beers go to the finals, which that's definitely a first for me. The other one I did was a Russian Imperial Stout, and I used the second runnings to do sort of a quasi dry stout. To be honest with you, that second runnings beer is still in a keg, and I haven't even tapped it yet, but I have tasted it. It's not really that good. I don't think it translated very well. It tastes a little bit thin. I probably should have capped the mash with a few more pounds of grain to sort of liven up the malt profile, and probably added some more roasted barley because it's not very roasty. Tastes more like a brown more than anything else, but it's not that good. In any case, I would have just thrown that sugar out if I didn't do something with it. So I'm giving it a little bit more of an opportunity to age out. Jay from Final Gravity podcast, he asks about what my favorite hop varietal is and for what reason. That's a tricky one. My freezer is full of, you know, several ounces of almost every hop. Of course, I'm always finding out that there's a bunch of hops I've never heard of. Let's see, my top runners are definitely Cascade. Definitely see some plants behind me. I've got a bunch more on the side yard here, and they're all Cascade, or most of them are Cascades anyway. It's such a versatile hop, and I really do love American ales. You know, American pale ales are probably my favorite beer. I mean, I haven't really mastered brewing them to my liking yet, but certainly if I'm out and I'm buying a beer at a brew pub or something like that, I'm always after the APAs and IPAs, and Cascade's definitely one of the biggest runners there. I do use Centennial, which is a higher alpha version of Cascade, and I also like Chinook and Simcoe. I love all of the citrusy, pineapple-y American hops like the Amarillos and Cascade and Centennials. I think Amarillo for a while was one of my favorites. I used Amarillo in just about every beer I made. It started kind of grating on me having that pineapple-y aroma in every beer, so I started backing off of the Amarillo. So yeah, just about any of the American styles, and even that I'm sort of getting away from now, because I want to sort of understand the flavor and aroma profiles of all of the other varieties. And one of the next beers I plan to brew is a saison that uses all Sriracha Ace, the Japanese varietals. I have 4 ounces of that. I've been dying to use up, so I'm going to be doing a saison with that. And after that, I'm going to do a huge Simcoe IPA. I know Weyerbacher has the double Simcoe IPA that I really do like, and I want to try to clone that, at least to some degree. All right, that's about it. I answered all the questions that were on the comments, and of course, you don't have to wait for me to formally ask for questions. If you have any, I'll try to answer any questions I get in comments or directly to my inbox. All right, this was pretty boring of a video. I hope you stuck with me. If I have a little bit of extra time and I don't think it's dragging too long, I'll show you a little bit of my brewery and my storage area. Has a fair share. All right, we're in my basement now, and here's a funky barrel filled with 60 gallons of Flanders Brown, and I've been babysitting this barrel for this is the 3rd year now, 3rd batch of beer. And it's sort of a permanent fixture in my basement. And I have a bunch of stuff that has been bottled for a while. And that is my very limited grain collection right there. You can see I'm running pretty low on grain. I didn't get in on the latest grain purchased. So I have maybe a total of maybe 100 pounds of grain ready to go. Now we're in my garage. Hops and Italian ice, that's all we need in here. So I've got probably, 10 pounds total of hops in here, and I'll probably end up throwing away half of that before I get to use it, but I just don't like having to wait for UPS before I can brew.
I like cold beverage,